So for more on the run-up to the US presidential election in November, let's bring in political analyst and columnist Bill Crane. Bill, good to see you again.
Good to be here, Sally.
Let's start with Biden in South Carolina. He's told voters of the black community there that you're the reason I'm president. Is that an extension to the black vote in general, or just more in South Carolina?
You can certainly extrapolate without a strong, enthusiastic turnout by African-American voters that this is a tough path for Joe Biden to be reelected in the White House. But South Carolina was pivotal 4 years ago. Joe Biden came out of Iowa, the Iowa caucus, the New Hampshire primary, and the Las Vegas caucus, sort of a walking wounded candidate. But Jim Clyburn, the dean of the House delegation in the state of South Carolina, rallied the troops. Former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms went and traveled to South Carolina and campaigned and canvassed there for weeks. And Joe Biden turned his campaign around.
The plight of Palestinians, considering the conflict in Gaza, has really resonated strongly with the black community. Black pastors have been putting pressure on Biden to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Do you think that the president's posture on the war could imperil his re-election bid?
I think with African-American voters, it's more his economic policies and some of the social policies of the Biden administration. Joe Biden ran as a centrist candidate. He was going to be a healer, not a divider. He was going to bring Capitol Hill together and pass legislation of a bipartisan nature. Thus far, that hasn't really happened. And there have been several polls that have indicated that African-American voters, particularly African-American men, have cooled towards the concept of a second term for Joe Biden in the White House, with some polling showing that support down as much as 20%. If Joe Biden were to actually lose 15 to 20% of the African-American vote in the November general election, there are not enough independents or non-aligned voters to close that gap.
Now we've got Trump, of course, barreling ahead. He's got court appearance after court appearance. He's just been ordered to pay $83.3 million to E. Jean Carroll, which is incredible. How much of a dent will that make in his campaign, financially specifically, but also given that there's a growing consensus among pundits and the business elite that Trump is the odds-on favourite? Are we looking at a Trump win here, despite everything that's happening with him right now?
Well, in Nevada, the next caucus, Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, is not even on the ballot. If we're talking about South Carolina, I do think Donald Trump is going to win there. The question is by how much. It is Governor Haley's home state, but President Trump has been running essentially as an incumbent, though he is not. The legal challenges, though, still give reason for Nikki Haley or another candidate, if they so choose, to unsuspend their campaign and stay in it at least through Super Tuesday, when a sufficient number of delegates will be awarded to not lock up, but make it very clear who the next nominee is going to be. But for whatever series of reasons, former Governor Haley, who is also Donald Trump's United Nations ambassador, has gotten under the former president's skin. It was very evident by his remarks on an election night in New Hampshire. He wants her out. He wants the RNC to declare the battle over. He wants to be declared the presumptive nominee. These are not steps that a typical candidate or someone who feels very safe in their trajectory does. And his legal obstacles are real. I don't think the E. Jean Carroll judgment and a jury awarding $83 million is a substantial stumbling block for the former president. His attorneys will continue to appeal that probably long after he is or is not again in the White House. But I do think it's the culmination of all of those legal battles, which continue. 91 felony indictments, 4 different jurisdictions, 2 federal and 2 state, that there's still the opportunity for a felony conviction or at least going to trial before the November general election. And in poll after poll, when asked about Donald Trump if he would feel the same way if he had a felony conviction on his record, enough, again, just like the African-American vote breaking away from Joe Biden, of his core supporters either say they don't know or it would change the mind about how they'd vote.
As always, Bill Crane, thank you for your time, political analyst and columnist.